Will the Bengals make a move before the October 31st trade deadline? I ask Mo Egger of ESPN 1530 that question and much, much more right now on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. Hi again, everyone, and welcome into CBT. I'm James Rapien of allbengals.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and, well, the bye week is over, and we have you covered. Whether it was Orlando Brown Jr. on Monday, our post-practice stand-up with the latest injury updates and much, much more from Paycor Stadium, or all week long, yes, we will be in Santa Clara for Bengals 49ers, a huge, huge game between two teams sort of trending in the wrong direction. One trending in the wrong direction, the opposite directions is how I should say that, because the 49ers, well, they've dropped two in a row. We will be there. So hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. And without further ado, let's welcome him in. Mo Egger from ESPN 1530. Catch him every single weekday, 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530 in the iHeartRadio app, at Mo Egger on social media. And I asked Mo a bunch of different questions, including trade deadline related questions, because the Bengals, well, I want to see them make a move. I think you want to see them make a move. And Mo agrees as well. Let's get to our conversation with Mo Egger. Mo, you talked a lot about the trade deadline with Tony on Monday on ESPN 1530. I've covered it some here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk as well. What's your response when people say, the Bengals don't make trades? They never do that. Mike Brown doesn't make trades, because every article, every video, that's the initial comment from someone and everyone is saying it now. And despite that, I still think there's at least a chance they make a deal before the deadline. But what's your response when you see that?
When I hear somebody say they don't make trades, my response is correct. They also don't win Super Bowls. So, and now they have a chance, like a legitimate chance, just despite the start, despite the way the season has unfolded. It's not that far-fetched to suggest the Bengals are going to make a deep run in the postseason and end up in Vegas in February. So maximize your ability to do that. And look, they've broken so many of their traditional molds, right? This is sort of the last one. This is sort of the last thing that they could do that they typically don't do, right? And there are extenuating circumstances here. Extenuating circumstances oftentimes involve you doing things you don't want to do. You never want to part with draft capital. You don't want to have to make trades. But the extenuating circumstances to me involve the Bengals having a legitimate chance to win the title this year. At the same time, they're falling behind the rest of the pack in the AFC North. They can't afford to wait anymore. The schedule gets really tough. You can't simply hope that Irv Smith develops trust with Joe Burrow that hasn't materialized. You can't simply hope that somebody else fills the Samaje Perine role that could be filled by Samaje Perine. You simply can't hope that Joe Mixon, at the usage rate that they're deploying him with, is going to stay healthy and suddenly find this burst of productivity that we haven't seen in such a long time. And so, no, I think the idea of, well, let's not talk about trades because it's not what they do. Well, we've lauded this franchise in many respects for all the different ways in which it's evolved. So then I'm led to think that it's okay to push for them to evolve even more, especially given how the league has changed. Look, 10 years ago, the Bengals were like everybody else. Nobody made trades. We've seen a bunch already here before the deadline. We saw the Philadelphia Eagles, less than 24 hours after beating a good Miami team, trade away a guy who played every defensive snap the night before in order to make an upgrade at the position. We've seen the Kansas City Chiefs make the sort of trade that the Bengals, I think, could make for Samaje Perine if you want him back, and bringing back McCole Hardman. By the way, Kansas City is in better shape than Cincinnati. They were 5-1 at the time of the deal, and they went and swapped picks to get a guy who they really didn't have to reteach the system or anything. You're seeing more and more trades in this league. I think you had, James, you probably know this better than I do, were there like 30 players who changed teams during the season last year?
Yeah, there was a lot.
Yes. Right. It's a tactic that more and more teams are using. Why shouldn't we push the Bengals to continue to evolve and be one of those teams when they have bona fide Super Bowl aspirations?
I totally agree. And just to continue that case, they have cap space, so they can absorb someone. No problem. It's not like that's an issue. And for some teams, that is an issue. And they have picks. They're going to have 9 picks in the 2024 draft.
Right.
What the hell are they going to do with 9 draft picks?
Right.
What we've seen these late rounders, like Chris Evans. People want Chris Evans on the field. He's a 6th rounder. Travion Williams, 6th rounder. Chase Brown, 5th rounder. If you just didn't have one of those picks, but you get Danico Autry or AJ Dillon or insert whoever that helps your team, random tight end from New England, whether it's Gesicki or Hunter Henry, it makes you that much better. And I do think the Bengals, they're self-aware enough to know how close these games have been in the AFC title game, the Super Bowl. Like, one player can be the difference between converting on 3rd and 8 at Arrowhead and Joe Burrow getting sacked again by Chris Jones. Like, that's the difference. So I still think there's a chance, and it makes a ton of sense. One guy that you talked about on your show was Darren Waller.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. Why does Waller stand out to you? Who else stands out? Because I love just getting different perspectives, because the Bengals have obvious needs and they have assets to address those needs.
Well, Waller stood out to me, just, sort of like a lot of us did. You take a step back because the Bengals don't play, and you watch everybody else, and you see Darren Waller on a Giants team that has no outside weapons, that was playing with a backup quarterback that was just consistently making plays. And he is a guy who's put up huge numbers. You don't need him to put up the Raiders version of Darren Waller's numbers. You need him to put up Hayden Hurst numbers. Could he do that in this offense with his profile, with his physical gifts? Of course he could. I default to Darren Waller simply because of the position. Look, we spent the entire month of March and half of the month of April, most of the month of April, talking about what the Bengals could do at tight end. They've gotten it wrong. Just call it what it is. By the way, wouldn't Sam Laporta look good in this offense right now? Especially as you're watching Myles Murphy play one more defensive snap than you. So that doesn't mean that Myles Murphy is not going to be a very good player, but we went into the season going, okay, if they say goodbye to Hayden Hurst, they're going to have to find a long-term solution at that position. Darren Waller is 31 years old. He's not a long-term solution, but Irv Smith doesn't feel like the short-term solution. And you could simply, shrug your shoulders and go, well, hopefully he and Joe get on the same page, or you can be proactive about it. I'm on the side of proactivity, especially when you're in a window in which you can win. And then this offseason, you could rethink how much you value the position. So I start there. There are other names who have been thrown around. Mike Gesicki's name has been thrown out there. Zach Ertz's name has been thrown out there. Who am I forgetting? Hunter Henry's name has been thrown out there. Right. So
that's the one for me.
Yeah.
Like, final year of his deal. They can't complain about his contract.
Right.
Like, just go get him. Go
get him.
Are
all of those players better than what you have right now? Yes. And, hey, it's 3rd and 7. It's the divisional round. They're in Baltimore, or they're in Kansas City, or they're in Jacksonville, and Joe's got to have it, and the tight end runs the wrong route, or the ball goes through his hands, or they can't count on him to make a play. We're just going to shrug our shoulders and go, well, that's just, what? They don't trade for anybody, so forget trading for a tight end. I want the best possible players on the field, especially in a year like this. And, again, you see more and more teams hitting the eject button very quickly. Denver has, Tennessee has, the Giants should, the Cardinals should, the Patriots should. Those teams have tight ends. Or then there's the Samaje Perine thing, and I'm certainly not the only person to talk about this, but, all offseason, we talked about two things. What are they going to do at running back in relation to Joe Mixon? Well, they've leaned on him more, and he's wearing down. Number two, they've got to fill the Samaje Perine role. Well, they haven't. Chase Brown hasn't. Travion Williams hasn't. Chris Evans hasn't. You mean to tell me the Denver Broncos wouldn't be willing to part with Samaje Perine for a late-round pick? And then, problem solved. You fill the Samaje Perine role with Samaje Perine. And what's funny to me is I get pushback to that. It's Samaje Perine. Well, the dude was important enough to give the football to on 3rd and 1 with Aaron Donald on the other side of the line of scrimmage. They probably don't make the Super Bowl without Samaje Perine 2 years ago. And suddenly we're going to be dismissive about the suggestion that they should try to bring him back. And if it's not him, do you mean to tell me the way they're using running backs right now is going to work for a team that has Super Bowl hopes? I don't buy it. And so, again, you could sit there and shrug your shoulders and simply hope for better results, or you can do everything you can to try to achieve them. And for my money, and I know you agree, that involves making a trade.
You can catch Mo every single weekday, 3 to 6 on Cincinnati's ESPN 1530, also the iHeartRadio app. Mo, to me, it's three obvious needs, glaring holes. Not that I wouldn't be open to other positions, but
Mhm.
it's running back, tight end, and like interior pass rusher. Like if you
Yeah.
could add Larry Ogunjobi, I know it's
Right.
not him, but that version from 2 years ago that you had
Mhm.
on a 1 year deal, you would do it. I mentioned Danico Autry. I think that guy could fill that role from the Titans. Who knows? But contract year, by the way, just throwing that
Mhm.
out there. How would you rank those needs? And are there any others in there? Because those are the three most obvious for me.
I would probably list tight end first, although I think you can make a case for any of the three. They need help on the inside of that defensive line. They need something to evolve at running back. They need what they're doing at that position's not working. But I mean, look, offensively, what do they do well right now? They throw to Jamar Chase. T. Higgins is not having a great year. Tyler Boyd is, sort of been hit or miss. They're not a good running team. The last couple of years they have had a productive tight end. Not a guy who was putting up Travis Kelce numbers. And I think sometimes that's what happens, right? With that position in particular, the high profile nature of like Gronk and now Travis Kelce, it has, I think people, well, if you're not one of those guys, you're not valuable. Well, those dudes are Hall of Famers. Like, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for a guy that can catch 5 passes a game, be a threat in the red zone, and make them more difficult to defend. Darren Waller can do that. And so just because I feel like they badly lack that element and they're really easy to defend right now, I would prioritize tight end more than the others. But I don't think anybody would be upset if they addressed the other two positions. I'm not sure I see another one as a major area of need. Their secondary has been killer. They're set at linebacker. It's not like they're going to go and trade for another wide receiver. T. Higgins is back healthy. So, and I think they're pretty comfortable with the guy they have playing quarterback. So, but those three are we use the term premium position. You might say, well, they're not premium positions, but they're positions that they haven't gotten the requisite production that you're looking for. And if that continues, this team's ceiling is not that high.
Yeah, I agree. And I think they've been so shallow just to kind of push the conversation forward a bit. Like Joe's been limited,
Yeah.
but who's been reliable outside of Jamar Chase? Like it's really tough to play quarterback when you have one guy, one skill guy performing at a high level. And that's the part of this where adding someone else just to give another wrinkle makes a ton of sense. But let's push the conversation forward. How concerned, not concerned are you about this offense? Because obviously it's been shaky at best through the first 6 weeks for a bunch of reasons.
So I'm concerned about it for something for the reason that you and I talked about either right before or after week one. Typically when the Bengals lose, it's because of their offense. Now, they've had defensive issues this year, right? They haven't been great against the run, but for the talent they have, as great as Joe is, it feels like they spin their tires way too much. Now you might say, well, early in the season it was the calf. Okay, fine, but they had a half last year against the Browns in which they put up 0 points. They had moments last season, as good as the team overall was, where it just felt like they couldn't the engine wouldn't turn on when they turned the key over. In the playoffs 2 years ago, behind that awful offensive line, they scored 5 touchdowns in 3 games. Like, they don't have a very long track record of just these protracted periods of time where they're just lighting teams up. And so I'm led to believe that at some point this year, maybe in multiple occasions, they're going to have to win games in spite of their offense. Are they good enough to do that against the teams they have on their schedule here over the final 11 games? I think you're being fair if you conclude the answer is no. Now, maybe they come out of the bye and Joe Burrow looks like Joe Burrow again. And let's be honest, that's the biggest caveat, right? He didn't play well against Seattle. If we see the old Joe Burrow, then chances are we see something resembling the offense that we all envision. But they have one guy on offense who's having a good year. Their offensive line, I mean, we'll see what happens with Orlando Brown. I guess he's going to play, but they've enjoyed good health on the offensive line. What happens as maybe that becomes less of a case? What if T. Higgins doesn't get going? What if something happens to Jamar Chase, who missed games last year? What if they don't address deficiencies? What happens if Joe Mixon gets hurt? There are just so many things that concern me that seem like they're going to happen or that I fear will happen. And again, like we all have in our mind's eye a picture of what this offense could look like, and occasionally, including the first 2 drives against Seattle, We see it. We haven't seen it enough for me to assume that they're going to just flip a switch and with the personnel they have, start lighting teams up.
Yeah, and the concern, just looking at the offense, Tyler Boyd averaging 6.8 yards per reception,
Yeah.
not per rush.
Well, it was
Like,
Seattle when he had 7 catches and 7 targets for a whopping 39 yards. It's great that he caught the passes, but I mean, come on.
And that's like, is that offense? Does that mean that he doesn't have the juice anymore? Not that he had a ton of juice to begin with, but he was always getting you 10 or 11 per reception.
Yeah.
And now that's Jamar 11 per reception and everybody else is below that. It's weird. And that's another reason why I say add another weapon. Like, you're so quarterback centric, give him a little more help just in case things don't get in gear. Because if the offense can't win games, Mo, not just be good enough, but if they can't win some games, they're not going to get to where they expect to get to, because some of these teams are going to still be able to get after this defense and keep their quarterback upright and put up a bunch of points.
Sure. And the Kansas City Chiefs started 5-1 with an offense that had played unevenly. They've made their defense so much better. If there's a franchise in the league that could kind of shrug its shoulders and go, look, we've got Mahomes, we've got Reed, we'll figure it out, it's them. And instead they went, look, at wide receiver, we need to be better. They didn't acquire a star. I think McCall Hardman played in half of their games last year. But hey, we're comfortable with this guy. He knows the offense. Not going to take very long to build chemistry. By the way, he makes a play on special teams on Sunday. He gets a big catch on third down, and they win the game. Not every acquisition has to be a guy who's going to catch 10 balls a game. It's just somebody who makes you a little bit more difficult to defend, somebody who can give you someone who's reliable. Right now, there's nothing reliable on the Bengals. Now, obviously, Darren Waller, getting back to the guy we started the conversation talking about, would be, somebody you had to work in. He's obviously coming from another franchise, but established, great physical profile, has had awesome years, and I'm sure would just love a chance to come to a place where they're not playing out the string. Like,
yes.
How is the answer to that? No. And I think sometimes in life, man, you have to be willing to overpay sometimes. Not all the time, but there are always things in our lives we're willing to overpay for, man. I'm willing to overpay if a guy gives this team a better chance of getting to the postseason and winning once we're there. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'll never blame a front office for going all in when it makes sense. And I think for this team, it makes sense.
Totally agree. I think he's easily the best tight end option that's potentially on the market and would completely, it would really transform the passing game a bit, especially if Boyd doesn't have the juice or it takes Higgins a little bit longer. You would have another guy that you could rely on if you needed him to play a bigger role than the tight end has played in this offense. He's Mo Egger. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Mo Egger. Catch him every single weekday, 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530 and the iHeartRadio app. Mo, you're the man. I appreciate you coming on.
I got to have one of your books behind me. I need to do that. Next time I'll have it right here. I'll get a little shelf. It'll look perfect.
There we go. Well, no, there's too much Reds gear over there. Bearcat gear. Enter the Jungle just doesn't fit. That's all.
It can.